Welcome, everyone, to the Insurance Perspectives podcast. On today's show, we have Chris Cline of ACT, and author of the book, The Inertia of Legacy, Using Newton's Laws for Transformative Change, a science geek's guide to managing your own legacy. Before jumping over to ACT, Chris spent 28 years at the great insurance carrier Westfield. While at Westfield, Chris served in various capacities, including National Agency Distribution Leader. He also hosted the Closing the Gap podcast, experience that hopefully will be beneficial to him today as we grill him in the hot seat. Chris's goal now as executive director at ACT is to help agents along their technology journey. Last year, Chris added author to his resume, as I mentioned in his intro, after releasing The Inertia of Legacy. In the book, Chris discusses blending inertia and legacy to help you make the effort today so that your future stories are what we want them to be. Chris resides in one of my favorite states, the Buckeye State. OH.
IO.
Told Jeff you do it. And when he's not steering independent agents in the right technology path, he's writing and performing music on his guitar, which has a little cameo in the background there. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. I am a huge fan of ACT. It's been one of the most influential organizations that I've been able to participate in the industry. And so we could not think of a better person to help us kick off this series with. Thank you so much for being here.
I really appreciate it, Kenny. Thanks to you personally and the whole HawkSoft team for inviting me to share my voice and talk about this really needed subject matter today, as technology is just, as we all know, right? It's beyond cliche to talk about how quickly it's changing, how profoundly it's impacting our lives, really society in general, certainly with the advent and the proliferation of AI. So we can take this in any way you want, but really look forward to the conversation, and thank you personally again and HawkSoft for the support of ACT and what we're trying to do, even as we kind of evolve here and think differently about how we can help independent agencies and the channel think differently about technology and showcase the companies that are actually investing in the channel and are focused on helping independent agencies win, much like you guys.
Oh, thank you. And that sets me up really, really well for my first question. So this is season 2 of our podcast, where we've done some different mini series exploring different topics. The first topic we did a while back was agencies that were captive, moving independent, and almost every single person we interviewed said that it was important to find a group, find a community to join so that you could learn from your peers, learn from people who've done this before, and grow. And from my perspective on the technology side, in the InsurTech side, or even the carrier technology side, ACT as an organization like that, where it's a place where you can go and meet like-minded individuals, discuss the industry, learn from your peers. I'd love to know from you, sitting in your vantage point, what is ACT and why should people know about it? Why should people join in?
We're a program under the National Big I. We're a completely nonprofit. So we're vendor neutral. So as Kenny knows and appear, not only just great companies like HawkSoft, but others that participate in your trading space to help agencies. And that's what makes this cool and how I got introduced to it in my time on the carrier side. So spent a lot of time working strategic relationships and partnerships and got to participate in ACT when my predecessor, Ron Berg, was at the helm, and really loved how we bring together carriers, technology providers, and the agent broker in a very neutral and collaborative space to talk about anything that relates remotely to technology and how that can enable an agency's unique business strategy. And so when Ron spent like 6 months encouraging me to leave, as you mentioned, the great carrier Westfield, took me a while, but I was really intrigued by this, and I care about the independent channel and the vision that was there. And so we're in the process now of just kind of pointing the directional arrow a little bit more towards the future. So in the past, ACT had been really focused in a work group model, which will persist. I think the work groups are great, but a more tactical and transactional things, producing white papers, best practices, policies, and procedures very, very applicable at the time, very much recognized. But a couple things that have kind of hit me and I think support where we're going is that, first of all, technology is changing much faster today than it ever was. And there's so much more uniqueness to each independent agency out there. The models, the focus, the types of customers they're choosing to attract, the talent they have, and really the way they're trying to show up in the marketplace. So it's while the work that ACT had done had been really valuable in the past, it takes a little bit too long through our traditional model to build something and that is applicable to fewer agents. So what we're trying to do now is still bring together all those stakeholder groups in a very neutral and agnostic way, in a collaborative way, try to unify the voice for the industry, really putting the agent at the center, but the industry at large, to talk about what are the things, these themes or the trends that are like right in front of us and coming that will influence agents in the industry through the lens of technology and the opportunities and risks, of adopting or not adopting that come along with those. And then being more intentional about putting companies like yourself that are investing not only in us, but the channel in more of a spotlight to tell your story. So that way we are less of the technical experts and we can talk about the stuff and then invite agencies to work with the individual company that may be focused and with the technical capabilities of solving their needs at that given time, whether it is looking at a new management system, a comparative rater, a data company, a cyber company, whatever the tools are. And so that's been really sort of fun to work on here over this year and think it'll continue to add value to agencies. And so just a quick kind of closing on that. A lot of folks want to know what it takes to be an ACT member and might not even be aware. So if your agency, if you're an agency out there listening and you're a member of your state's Big I Association, you are a member of ACT. You have access to everything we do. You can participate in anything that we put on. You can join our meetings and our calls and our webinars and those types of things. And so if you are not a member of your state Big I Association, this is probably an answer to a question later, please consider joining, right? I mean, there's a lot of things they do that you may not be aware of, and a lot of, the old Oldsmobile commercial that this isn't your grandfather's Olds or Buick, whatever it was that, Kenny.
Sure.
I think I'd encourage you to take a look at your state and get involved.
It was amazing to me the very first time I got to participate in an ACT meeting, an in-person ACT meeting, because I was in the room with everyone who on paper I knew were competitors, were not even just in HawkSoft's vertical itself, other management systems were present, but there were, multiple marketing companies, multiple rating companies. And I remember Paul Hawkins telling me, HawkSoft CEO, he told me that, everybody just takes their hat off when we go in this room. You're not HawkSoft when you go in there, you're the industry. And that's always felt special to me about what ACT is able to accomplish.
I'd love to just comment on that because I think that's a great point, certainly beyond even the ACT commercial. But one of the things that I've really grown to appreciate and really find as part of why I have a passion for this industry, and it's affirmed as I talk to new technology companies specifically and new employees that enter this industry, is they talk about how friendly we are and how supportive we are. And so there are people that are not those things. Everywhere. Sure. And there are companies that are a little less collaborative, but that's usually the epiphany people have, is how willing a competitor is to help. And I don't know, that's at the agency side, and that's even really on the technology side. Everybody knows each other. So it's a kind of a really small, large industry, but it's cool, right? I mean, of the 40 plus thousand,
it really is.
There's a reason why two of them can exist across the street from each other successfully. In most towns in the U.S. They're not really arm wrestling over accounts in the coffee shop every Saturday morning.
Right. Exactly. And I think that that is one of the things I love about working in insurance is, we've had Sid Rowe, Vertifor on here before. We've had, I'm trying to think if we've had an implied person on quite yet, but maybe one day. And we have those relationships where it's like, maybe occasionally we go head to head in something, but with our focus being that it's what's best for the agency is best for the agency, then we can kind of leave egos aside and say like, okay, let's focus on the solution here. Um, I'm passionate about this subject. I could talk on it at length for a very long time. You gave me an interesting opportunity to maybe frame the conversation, the questions I wanted to ask you, because a piece of what happens at ACT is evaluating and discussing emerging technology and how it impacts our industry. And so I kind of want, if you're open to it, to let's take a look at AI as an angle of attack here, because I have some questions about how agencies maybe should be researching or exploring technology, and I'd love to kind of think about this in the context of AI because it's a huge topic for agencies these days.
Sure.
So maybe if we set the stage, when you think about the future of our industry and artificial intelligence, large language models as it plays in, how are you seeing that just come on the scene? What is out there that is kind of grabbing your attention that you're starting to think about in that arena?
AI was not much more than like this movie fictional thing until almost 2 years ago when ChatGPT free hit the scene, and it became a novelty. It became the premise for fear, for extreme excitement about how it was going to revolutionize society. Remember, there was so many like reports that it was going to impact 15 plus million white collar jobs over the next 2 years. Well, here we are 2 years later. I'm sure it's impacted more than a few people in a positive way or even a scary way, but I'm certain it has not eliminated 15.5 million white collar roles. And so that Gartner has the hype curve dynamic, right? And so we went through that. And I think we're starting to sort of stabilize a little bit in our view on what AI is. And even some of the most excited folks about what AI can do, people that are most excited about what AI can do, are starting to recognize that it's going to be a little harder to fully integrate into the daily operations of any small business, let alone a smaller agency or an average size agency. But we are having some observations about how it's being adopted. Quite candidly, and this may not be a popular opinion, Kenny, I think it's being adopted at a much lower rate and in a much less sophisticated way than some of the folks who are at the very tip of the spear, would like us to think. That being said, with language models being available largely for free or very little subscription costs, we're seeing a lot of people exploring it. And if your agency is not using AI, at least to your knowledge, I assure you that people in your shop are. They're playing around with ChatGPT and using it to do some homework and research, maybe helping with an email, clean up, proofread. Maybe you're using it more intently to write social media content, help drafting email replies. See that a lot, or at least hear those conversations. And then there's some more what I would consider to be operational in ways that are kind of beyond the I'm experimenting. Contract reviews, document reviews, it's a powerful tool in helping kind of look at a large document and pull out themes or trends. And so hard market time, I've heard some folks talking about having it look at renewals, looking for download to look at reserve adjustments. AI has been there's some products out there that are doing a decent job of ingesting PDFs, say from carriers or other third parties, interpreting the PDF and putting it into places and giving output from that, and kind of vice versa. And voice, there's a couple of really strong vendors out there. One of them is a great an ACT partner who, and not that I'm saying they're the best, but boy, they've really productized AI in a way that you can now interact with and create some sort of objective view. And people have questions about it still, licensing and ethical and integrity concerns, but the capabilities are there. But by and large, I think this belief, maybe not a belief, but it might have been a subconscious belief, that by just making these language models and tools available to the masses, that there would just be this tsunami of people proactively building something within their organization with it. And I think that's maybe where sort of this fallacy / difference of approach is. And being a hot rod guy or whatever, there's this whole bought versus built dynamic.
Yeah.
I think our industry will always has, and needs people who are builders, who are creators, who really love to press against the status quo, think what if. They have the capabilities or the wherewithal or just the genuine curiosity to go build something anew. And we're seeing some of that with AI. And they're the ones that are great, it's great in that regard. And they're kind of figuring out where this stuff works. And we've always seen those, regardless of what phase we're in. But by and large, I think most agencies will be consumers of product from companies who have invested in trying to figure out what are very real pain points or things that need to be solved for, or what new capabilities can the industry sort of take advantage of by way of AI. And then they will consume the product rather than creating it. And so
Yeah.
that sounds a little defeatist, and I don't believe it is, because I would say if we asked the vast majority of agencies if they built their own AMS, if they built their own CRM, if they built their own competitive rater, most haven't,
Yeah.
but most love having those tools at their disposal. And that came from new capabilities, new technology, and a few people on the bleeding edge that said there's a better way to do A, B, or C.
That was a great overview of the spectrum of capability and opportunity with AI. Big question I want to ask you is, so now if someone wanted to find out more about AI as an example of technology, what would you recommend an agency, someone in an agency or an insurance professional, how do they find out more about this technology? What questions should they be asking? How should they be investigating this thing? What resources are out there? Love to get your take on that.
Yeah, this one's a little bit unique than a lot of, or maybe a lot's the wrong word, than other prior technology innovation, because I think this is has so much potential to impact all of society. And I will admit, and we could go down these rabbit holes if you want, because one of the answers to this is step outside the industry and see how the rest of the world is talking about AI, other industries, other businesses. A couple of practical ways. Look, with as much as AI is being talked about today, obviously here, join us at ACT. AI is a strategic focal point of us moving forward. We're collaborating with states, but I to talk about this as well. But I encourage every agent, whether it's AI or maybe even more, what capabilities are coming and what pain points the agencies are trying to solve for, coupled with what things they would love to be able to do. Talk to your current tech providers, talk to your carriers about what they're seeing, right? Let's leverage these resources about what's on their roadmap, why, and then how you can get involved in talking about what it is your agency or business is trying to fix, right? Because the more the companies that actually can productize this stuff, right, are hear what the pain points of their customer base is or their prospects are, and then even what the desires are, you have a better chance of understanding where that is in priority or not, and helping influence it there. So it's a great way of influencing the future while also learning. I guarantee your carrier partners are talking about all this as well, and will love to kind of learn while sharing. Really get plugged in and start to consume some of this stuff again that is outside our industry, because what I believe, and it will sound a little counterintuitive coming from a person who runs an agent's council for technology, we can tend as an industry over the years to kind of view our problems in our own world through our own, whatever the structure is around us. And there is real value in at least hearing how other people are talking about stuff, good or bad, and then figuring out how do we apply that to what makes our industry very, very unique. And I think there's some things that are very obvious to folks that make our industry unique that will influence pace, change, and priority, certainly 50 state regulation and market conditions and all of those types of things. But being that we are a risk transfer industry rather than a widget manufacturing industry, there's 40,000 agents, a couple thousand carriers, who knows how many hundreds, if not thousands, of technology solutions. There's the math on that is mind blowing when you think about how many unique combinations there are, and how important it is for us to remain financially stable and viable. So those things sort of create some level of a little slower to evolve than some other industries. I mean, if you're in the
Yeah.
robotics or manufacturing industry, you're probably a little further along
Sure.
than somebody who's making $1 million bets about whether the Joneses and the Smiths can drive their car all day.
Um, I love that answer so much. Particularly the first avenue you took us down. I'm a huge fan of getting outside of our space. I think that while there are definitely conversations where I find myself at a disadvantage because um, I was on my parents' insurance until I was like 27, and then I just got my mother-in-law to hook me up with an agent, kind of thing. Um, where I'll have a conversation about insurance, and I'm on the outside, and I don't have the insider perspective or the institutional knowledge to understand. I've seen agents look at a roof and know immediately all of the underwriting parameters. It's not something I can do. I come from a completely different space. I was an educator. I worked in higher ed and language acquisition. But I think oftentimes that perspective helps me communicate a little bit better, or it helps me see a potential pitfall. And so I love the advice to agencies, to insurtechs, to carriers to, hey, go outside of our space, hear what other people are saying.
There's stuff going on in the margins that we need to be paying attention to. And they might be outside your traditional peripheral vision as a business professional if you're not stopping and or taking time and intention to. You still got to go where you're going. You got a business plan and operational goals to hit, but there's stuff out there, and I think that goes for carriers that are really trying to understand, the sophistication here and how it can help with far more sophisticated at pricing and underwriting and fraud detection and really large scale process efficiency modeling. I mean, you can interview 30 people that do a job and get an opinion on how or what things might be broken, or you can run that process a million times through an AI in a matter of minutes and have human feedback and objective things married together and get perspectives you never had before. Now, is that available? Is that really the kind of thing that most agencies have the financial resources or time to do? Probably not, but just thinking conceptually about that. And then if you're wondering about if that can be productized, there are companies in the insurance space who are thinking that way. And how do you take an entire transactional life cycle and start chipping away at pennies or less than pennies on each step of the way? Maybe or maybe not using AI, but to drive efficiencies. And all of those efficiencies create margin, which create capital, which create the opportunity to invest in net new things. And I'm going to pivot a little bit there because that's something that triggered is there's a real strong desire today when I'm interacting almost with anybody in the industry to talk about what AI do I need? What is AI doing? How do I think about AI? And we could, as we've started to talk about, I still think there is value in not asking for the solution first. And let's talk about what you're trying to solve for. And I'm a huge advocate of people process technology. You got to know your why, like Simon Sinek said, have your strategy in place. And then don't worry as much about what technology might be the solution, but let's still talk about what the problem is, right? And so I'm guessing nobody's going to roll into Lowe's or Menards on a Saturday morning and just say, here's my credit card, sell me some tools. Without knowing exactly what they're trying to solve, right? And I need to cut a piece of wood. Okay, well, here's a $5,000 table saw. Well, I'm only going to, no, I just need a handsaw. And those are kind of hyperbolic and they're a little bit cheesy, but it does take you outside of all of this where it can be easy to get lured into the shiny and the more romantic kind of things. Might exactly be what you need, but it might not be what you need. And so we encourage people to still start with, as they're evaluating their tech needs, and we can talk about some of those thoughts, but when it comes to this, is you have to be able to articulate exactly what you're trying to solve for or what you believe your pains are.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of think through, do I have a people? Do I have a leadership? Do we have processes? Can I maximize what I already have first? But then maybe the technology isn't AI. It's just
Mm-hmm.
something that helps you automate a mundane task to free up your staff to really add value where humans can add value. And that's not
Yeah,
typing the same address 5 times.
absolutely. And it's a point I make all the time. I think that, the Industrial Revolution solved for saving us days, weeks of processes. The dot-com boom and our pursuit and rapid growth in technology space has really solved for the hours and most time minutes. And so when I talk with technology companies in my day job overseeing integration at HawkSoft, I'm often saying like, oh, hey, this saves seconds and that matters, because it is one of those things where it adds up over time. And if you're going to be doing something 1,000 times a year and you can save seconds on that, it's gonna add up. Um, there was a
Well,
lot
right.
to dissect. Oh, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you think about that, right? And so in order to say, I just want to do something quicker, quicker than what?
Mm-hmm.
And just by virtue of you introducing the book Inertia, I'm definitely an armchair, but I'm a science geek, and I failed out of calculus as an engineering major. But I talk about this sort of these things require us to think a little bit more objectively about stuff. So I need to be able to do this quicker. This takes too long. In
Yeah.
order to have that, that's sort of implying a ratio
Mm-hmm.
of, and you have to know how long something takes today, objectively, how much that costs, and then first, which is
Mm-hmm.
hard work, but there are current tools today that can help you understand how long a typical auto endorsement, an ID card, a certificate, whatever those types of things take relative to how much you're paying a human being or your current technology solutions. But it's important to understand that so that you can make effective decisions about whether or not so a piece of technology or a company could come in and say, yeah, we can do that more quickly for you.
Mm-hmm.
But is it more quickly enough to even justify the expense and the change
Mm-hmm.
management that comes along for that? And so this is something that I've seen very real examples of, a lot of skinned and bloody knees from getting sort of excited about the opportunity that comes along with using something new. They heard a buddy talk about it. They read about it from somebody on LinkedIn or Twitter, but it didn't really make the impact in their agency. In fact, sometimes it makes it worse because they didn't understand this sort of core set of base circumstances,
Yeah.
which is an understanding of how much some of these transactions cost. And so it's important to have that clarity so that when you do make a decision, now you can actually start to talk with a new partner or even a current partner that you're expanding your
Mm-hmm.
portfolio with. How are we going to talk about what success looks like and what are going to happen
Yeah.
if we don't hit it? And I don't want to, maybe I think you guys would do this, right? But if a person can't articulate how they're going to close that delta
Mm-hmm.
and to think through it, then, maybe you want to talk to somebody else or
Yeah.
get a little bit more clear about what your stuff is and what you're trying to solve for. So apologize for that diversion, but I think
No. Um,
it's important. So quicker means quicker than something, and
yes. Yeah.
quick, that's also like distance over time. So how
Mm-hmm.
much you're going to accomplish over what period of time, you kind of have to be thinking about it both ways.
My encouragement to listeners right now is like, listen to this episode 3 times, because I think this perspective is really important when agencies think about the shiny object syndrome that we see a lot of. I work for a technology provider. I love gadgets. I love the cutting edge of everything. And my soapbox over the last 5 years has been, you don't need it. You can do it by hand. Take it slow. Think about your process, because one of the things that I really get concerned about is in the pursuit of success, which I won't begrudge any company that effort. Oftentimes we can kind of get blind to the actual need of our customer if you're not diligent. And I think the awesome thing about insurance technology, from my perspective, is that a lot of our companies, a lot of my peers in this space care deeply about the end result for the end user, the insured or the agency. And so we avoid a lot of these pitfalls, but you still see this hype or this like push to say like, if you don't have this piece of technology, you won't succeed. And I really love the advice you're giving to our listeners, because it's like, hey, what problem are you trying to solve? What is the actual need? Is this an organic need that's coming from you? Or is this something that an influencer told you that you need to be thinking about, but until you heard it from them, it hadn't even crossed your mind and you're a successful agent already? Are there other skills that you would recommend or counsel an agency on for how to process the hype or the magnetism that gets brought up maybe at a trade show or on LinkedIn post? How should they be kind of protecting themselves from that?
I just think an honest calibration. Don't do anything too quickly. In 30 years, Kenny, I don't know of an agency that went out of business because they didn't buy a new piece of technology yesterday. Now, there's agencies that have had to sell or that have struggled because they ignored the need to change and evolve and modernize their business over time. But I say all that by and large, you as an institution, as independent agencies, are healthy. You're incredibly viable. So market share went up in a world where untold billions of dollars of external capital came into the industry, with a large chunk of it 7 or 8 years ago, basically had all of us in our crosshairs. Agents don't add value and carriers don't know what they're doing with some of the message. Now that's dramatically changed. And oh, by the way, we had a global pandemic. So when you consider of all that noise, market share went up. Customers chose you despite all the woes. So that's something healthy to think about that. But I say all of that, and I spent a little bit extra time on that to say you do have some latitude, whether you're the most sophisticated agency in the world, and I would even say whether you're still living out of a filing cabinet, but please call Kenny and the team at HawkSoft.
Thank you.
To make sure you're getting yourself right. And even if you do go to a conference, which we encourage you to, or you're listening to podcasts or reading stuff, and you're finding some really cool things, because that's what's fascinating about the world with tech today. There's plenty of options to solve most of your pain points. Not all of them, right? This isn't perfect.
Yeah.
But you have to assess that against what your own agency's goals are, what your current set of technology is. Will it work together? Will it connect? Or have you made matters worse? Can you drive change and leadership through your organization to create adoption? I mean, a new tool that nobody uses or only half the staff you use is pointless. But the other part of it is, and this is my futuristic ideation, love to think about stuff, is I do think there is value in listening to influencers, and those that are the bleeding edge, because they are the ones who are creating the wins and the losses that will ultimately kind of feed back into the product development cycle in our industry. Just be cautious about overreacting and going and hearing somebody, because you don't even know if their agency ultimately has the same goals for you, the same infrastructure as you. But hey, somebody's doing this. I'm unaware of it. Now do your homework about what capabilities it can add. Do those capabilities align with what you want to do with your firm? And so I say this a lot, right? In our industry, there are incredibly successful independent agencies that are still residing on Main Street, in their community, deeply involved with, all of the local charities and the ball team, and they phenomenal with personal lines and small business in 3 or 4 counties. And then there are agencies that focus on micro small business in all 48 continental U.S. states, and they never interact with hardly any of their customers. Those are 2 very viable business models today. They're attracting a different client, they attract a different employee base, and they require different technology. So understanding where your agency is kind of on that continuum or even further out is really critical when evaluating and thinking about how a piece of technology may or may not support you, or how it might trigger some brainstorming or some creative thought as you start to now see how things can work. But I think that's the hardest piece, is when you're trying to take disparate ideas and just hope they Velcro together on a Tuesday when you've signed a lease deal.
Yeah. Absolutely. I kind of feel like that is a phenomenal place to land this. I do want to ask, inclusive of everything we've talked about, are there any other resources that you would really encourage an independent insurance agency to use so that they can learn more about technology in our industry?
Yeah, I mean, this will sound like full-blown commercial, and it is, but it's because I believe in it. I mean, I left
Yeah.
nearly a 30-year career at a great company because I believed in what the trade associations do. Regardless of what state you're in, please connect with your state association. Look at their partners list.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I can tell you about the way they handle it and the way ACT does, and I can't speak for 51 other people, but the companies that are involved in or supporting your trade association are companies that have done the homework. They believe in what you guys do. They believe in the value of getting aligned with your trade association, and they're writing checks and they're putting time and human capital into the industry. So they're also sort of in their own unique way being underwritten by people that are acting in your best interest as well, and making
Mm-hmm.
sure that we're not taking checks from people that don't care about the independent, and there's always, kind of noise and all of that, but start there.
Mm-hmm.
States, look at ACT or the ACT website. Collectively, there's got to be hundreds, if not thousands, of companies that are investing in that across the discipline. So start there, and go to events. If
Mm-hmm.
Go to Hug. I mean,
Oh,
you're
thank
a
you.
HawkSoft user, go to the event. I mean, we always talk about how this is just the nicest industry in the world, and listen to the speakers, go to the breakout sessions. Even if you're just drinking a glass of water, go to the lobby of the conference facility after dinner and start networking with your folks. And I guarantee, as soon as you turn around and bump into somebody, you're now in a conversation with an agency owner or another carrier or somebody else who's thinking about the same thing, that might be able to share some ideas, or quite candidly, you might be able to help them. So
Mm-hmm.
go to those things. I just encourage you to get involved. I mean, the cool thing about this industry is, even though there's 40,000 independent agencies, each doing this differently, many of the problems others are trying to figure out. And at the very least, give Kenny or I a call. I'd love to talk to you, and I might be able to
Absolutely.
help you find something. I don't know. I care immensely about this industry and believe deeply in what every independent agency does and the value they offer, customers in their community. So I'd love to help.
That is awesome. Chris, I cannot thank you enough for your time, this conversation, extremely validating in many respects, and also pushing me to think along some lines that I hadn't thought of before. Thank you, Chris, so much for your time today, and for being with us. I really want to encourage all of our listeners to check out your book, The Inertia of Legacy. Thank you for watching today's episode. Click the video description below to learn more about our guests and to view the latest podcast episode, as well as other content from HawkSoft. We appreciate you watching and hope you join us next time on the Insurance Perspectives podcast. Thank you.